What's going on, guys? Satsuki the Savage here, and today I'm going to be covering Unordinary episodes 133 through 150. Alright, so I'm starting to see the finish line, so we're going to jump right into this video. Let's do it. This time I'll start at the top of the ladder, covering the affairs of the authorities. Keon was able to get his interrogation from John, and we learned two things. One, John is practically traumatized by Keon since he reminds him of his past, and two, even John doesn't know why his dad wasn't punished for writing the Unordinary book. I brought this up a couple of times, but the fact that the author of Unordinary, the progenitor of the ideals that the authorities oppose, didn't receive a penalty other than his book being banned seems very unlikely. Keon was shocked by this prospect as well, and considering that we've seen Sarah get suspended just for reading the book, if William truly got off free with no repercussions, then it's a plot hole. Me, myself, I have faith in Uru-chan, so I believe there's a reason behind William's situation. My theory is that William has friends in high places, or maybe even a baby mama looking out for him. Besides that, Sarah's readjustment classes have been canceled due to Headmaster Vaughn's distrust of Keon's, teaching methods, which leads me to talk more about Vaughn. From what we have seen, Vaughn has a suspicious amount of disdain for authorities, and we don't know why. In addition, Keon gets bad vibes from walking on school campus, so whatever is going on with Vaughn, his shady nature will not be overlooked. Hopefully we get a fight from Vaughn soon because he is ready to run hands at the slightest challenge. Diving deeper into Wellston territory, I bring attention to John Doe, also known as Tuesday, recently being dubbed Joker. Taking into account the theme of high tiers representing playing cards, I think I called John's nickname almost 80 episodes ago. The Royals represent playing cards. Blyke is the Jack, Remi is the Queen, Arlo is the King, Sarah is the Ace, and John is the Joker. In his role as Joker, it seems like John's objective is to create paranoia by not only exposing elites and high tiers, but also by building up the legend of this mysterious student. If people don't know who is beating these high-profile students, then everyone is looking over their shoulder, maybe being reluctant to start fights. I can't speak to the effectiveness of this plan until it bears fruit, but it makes enough sense to work. Right now, nothing can stop John. Not Arlo's pleas, not Remi's words, and not even this alliance with Cecil. You'd have some tiny hope that John would go through the motions when fighting Cecil, or maybe not if you don't like her, but nonetheless, John followed his signature pattern of brutality. And even though Cecil is still working with John, I can't shake the idea that a beatdown like the one Cecil received will make her more incentivized to betray John. Cecil will not take John's violent attack as simply collateral damage, and from seeing her turn away from John's viciousness, I think a coup d'etat is in order when John reaches the top. I think Cecil will eventually realize that having John as king is much worse than having Arlo as king. This segues me into talking about the opposition to John, starting with Arlo. After Arlo's defeat at the hands of John, he has been completely passive and almost submissive to John's whims. It's a conundrum because Arlo has conflicting sides of his personality. On one hand, Arlo has the pride of a king, but on the other, he buys into the order of the hierarchy. Although Arlo doesn't like to be pushed and ordered around, the system he values mandates that he bench up and comply with John as he outranks him. What this internal conflict has done though is make Arlo reflect on his culpability in John's rampage. Although I disagree that Arlo is to blame for John's current actions, there is no denying that he was a factor. Arlo was the one who forced John to expose a part of his old self that he locked deep down in his heart, and once Pandora's box was open, John was never the same. Arlo takes the blame for the current state of affairs, even going as far as to apologize to John with hopes of putting the violence to a halt. Honestly, I didn't like seeing Arlo apologize, but I acknowledge that's probably just me wanting the asshole version of Arlo back. What complimented Arlo greatly in these stretch of episodes was seeing why he values the hierarchy to such an extreme extent. Ironically, the person who ignored the hierarchy altogether is the reason Arlo is so obsessed with order. That person is Ray. While having harmony between all tiers of students seems like a good idea, in actuality, all Ray did in his tenure was extend the fuse on the bomb. Since the hierarchy system isn't exclusive to Wellston and exists on the outside world, the problems are too deeply rooted to be fixed by any king. The students of Ray's reign were awaiting his graduation so that they could go back to their old habits, but this time the chaos was more abundant, and this is where Arlo came in. As much as Arlo respects Ray, he couldn't carry out Ray's dream while keeping the school intact. All he could do to restore order is speak the language everyone understands, which is getting your ass whooped. Since Arlo has witnessed the failure of no hierarchy in the aftermath of Ray's kingship, he is especially adamant about maintaining order. It's really that simple. It's also weird to think that Ray and Arlo aren't that much different. Of course, Arlo and Ray's methods differ, but they both wanted Wellston to prosper, and as kind as Ray was, he and Arlo both needed power to invoke change, because without power, neither of them would have made a difference. Next, the current target of John's crusade is fellow masked fighter Remi. Since the queen is next to fall in line, Remi and friends have been trying to scramble for a strategy against John, probing for a weakness. In this pursuit, the gang conjures up some ideas as to the limits of John's ability. First, John can't copy non-physical abilities that he can't see. The basis for this is John not replicating Junie's flash forward power in their fight. Second is John has a certain radius in which he can sense abilities. And third, John's copied abilities wear off eventually, since John doesn't use copied abilities indefinitely, but there has been no explicit limit discovered as of yet. However, Remi decided to talk to John first to avoid fighting, and thus we have another clash of ideals. John accuses the high tiers of negligence and abuse, while Remi says the same of John. While John has a point about the suffering he's endured at the hands of high tiers, the reason why I can't side with him is because his message becomes diluted with his hypocrisy. John is doing the same as high tiers. I'd argue even worse with the sheer savagery in his fights. John will have already won a fight, but he'll twist a metaphorical knife in the wound of his opponent, so even if they may deserve the beating, I still had to classify it as overkill. Not only that, John refuses to take responsibility in him not helping everyone he sees bullied. Yes, John has helped a lot of low tiers in distress, but he's also looked down on the weak and ignored some as well. John trying to live as a cripple is proof of his unwillingness to help out those in need. He chooses to leave that burden to people weaker than him. And please don't get my stance confused. John shouldn't have the obligation to use his power to be some fake ass Superman, but his criticism of others loses its luster when he himself has abandoned the role of protector despite all of his qualifications. As for Sarah, she was being assimilated in the world of low tiers. Through the aid of Evie, who is basically me, just a super fan of Sarah, we had Sarah get in a perspective of a low tier. As a low tier, you stick with other low tiers, you take alternative routes to class, and normally you get bullied by mid tiers, but Sarah is no ordinary cripple. Throughout these episodes, Sarah is doubting her own confidence, but she musters enough courage to fight back against the mid-tier bullying Evie and Roland. In fact, it goes deeper than that. Sarah influenced Evie to fight back, so in a way, while John is crushing the hierarchy from the top, Sarah is doing the same from the bottom. And speaking of John, he and Sarah's relationship is slowly starting to crack. While Sarah and John are good friends, John's lack of trust is being noted by Sarah, and since John keeps lying to her, when she eventually finds out about John's secret, it will probably devastate her. And with John poised to fight Remi, if and when he wins, that will be extra fuel to the fire, since Sarah and Remi are pretty cool with each other. As for the miscellaneous section, there are a couple of things to talk about. First, Remi asked Issa to hold her phone before she talked with John, which makes me think that maybe she's recording a conversation with John, hopefully, so she can expose him later, because I do think Remi will lose this fight with John. I mean, that's been the pattern with the Royals so far. So, yeah, that aside, then you have Sarah and Terrence meet up with these batch of episodes, which Terrence is the invisible boy, and he's had some shady connections, to say the least. So I wonder what's going to happen with that whole dynamic, okay? And in episode 137, we saw the flashback of Eason, Blake, and Arlo. And in that flashback, we saw the levels of all three of these cats. And it shows you how much levels can fluctuate in high school time. Because this was stated by Ray way back that when you're in high school, that's your time where your levels just go crazy, okay? So in that time, we saw Blake and Eason. As first years, they were sitting at a 3.6, and currently they are third years. In fact, Everybody who's a third year is John, who should have been in his fourth year. Of course, he got held back 1 year. Sarah, Blake, Eason, and Remi. All of them are third years, and Cecil and Arlo are fourth years, all right? But, yeah, in that time, they rose from 3.6, Blake and Eason, to Eason being a 4.4 and Blake being a 4.5. So, yeah, that's how much they leveled up. And with Arlo, he had a crazy change because as a second year, he went from a 4.8 to a 5.4 in the same year, and now as a fourth year, he is sitting at a 6.3. So his levels dramatically changed, all right? Dramatically. So, yeah, that kind of tailors me into talking about John because he was sitting at a 7, a flat 7, as a second year in high school. So did his level go up? We don't know. Maybe not, because he doesn't really use his abilities as much as everybody else, at least I'm assuming. So he could be sitting higher than a 7. We don't know. We have no clue. So yeah, that aside, last thing I want to talk about is Layla and her connection and all of this shady behavior, all right? She is with a company called Zetasci, some shit like that, okay? And in this company, she says that they specialize in the power research, the ability research, just like NX Gen. And in fact, she says, no, we're not like NX Gen. We're smaller. We're a more independent company since we're not backed by the authorities. And she said that in her trip, she was training people, all right? Which kind of reinforces my idea that she indirectly now had some connection to Sarah almost being kidnapped, all right? Because in those kidnap attempts, the people who tried to kidnap Sarah seemed like amateurs, all right? Because they didn't get the job done on 2 occasions. Of course, the second time they had John, Arlo, and Elena defending them, but still, they looked kind of rookie-ish. They didn't look like they were really up for the task. So that leads me into the idea that the people that Layla was trying to train were those people that were looking pretty amateurish, all right? And the time frame matches up because in the time that she told Darren that she was going on the trip was around the same time that these kidnappings happened. So that, and also the fact that when Darren mentioned that there was a drug that could dampen abilities, Layla didn't seem too surprised. That news did not shock her. Like, normally, I'm assuming that people would be like, what the fuck? A drug that can cancel your abilities? What? But Layla was just like, oh, shit. Cool. Wait, Serafina got hit with that? That's the one thing that surprised her. So, she didn't have anything to do, or she didn't directly order Serafina to get kidnapped, but I think she indirectly had something to do with it, of course. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about. So, the next thing, or the next video I'm going to have is a live reaction to episodes 151 through 155. So, yeah, I should have that. I may have that up by Friday. We'll see. We'll see. And after that, I'll have a whole discussion with the M5 members on everything unOrdinary. I have some questions stacked up, so that should be fun. But guys, that is pretty much it for the video. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe. Satsuki the Savage, out.
Am I dying to live, or am I living to die? Living a lie with my hands stressed out.